So I've been professionally fishing now for close to 30 years. It used to be about being on the water and winning tournaments. That's what it was all about. Obviously, our career has changed a lot with social media and interacting with people on social media and teaching and interacting with the fans. So with that being said, there's a tremendous amount of questions that come in. And I feel like if one person has that question, it's kind of like being in a crowd. A lot of people won't raise their hand or ask, but there's a lot of you that want to know the same thing. So Bobbi and I, Bobbi is my wife. She's behind the camera, so you don't get to see her a lot. You're probably going to see her interact in front of the camera some too on this one. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to bring you kind of a series of questions. Some of the questions I'm not even going to know because she thinks it's fun to surprise me and keep things exciting.
Like today,
I guess. So she's like, get up here and talk about this. And I don't even know what I'm talking about. So that's what it is. We're going to try to answer the questions that you all have and get your thoughts and opinions. And that's one thing about social media. If you're a fan of it, love it or hate it, it's here to stay too. And the one thing that we want to try to do though too is keep it positive, because man, if you've ever got down to comments or some of the things you see on social media, we'd like to keep it positive. I know that's hard to do, but we're going to do our best at doing it. So with that being said, I guess this is the first official question that is about to be thrown my way.
Yes. Okay.
So what is the question?
So this is going to be a kind of a new series we're going to be doing. That's like
series,
you asked, we answered.
You asked, we answered the question. So I can't wait to put Bobbi in front of the camera because
I will get some of it.
Easy, so.
No, I don't. I don't think it's easy. Okay. So some of these questions are going to come from your social media. Some are going to come from MLF or from Bass. I mean, I'm just going to scan through, and when people post things that I think they're interesting. So this one is actually from, I think it's like the Toyota BFL.
So this
page.
wasn't an actual question to me.
No, it was on
this was
one of the pages
or
groups we follow. It's on I think it's the Toyota BFL, one of those.
So it's about the BFL,
yeah.
The MLF BFL.
But this is something we talk about a lot.
Right.
And I think you'll have a lot of opinions on this. So this person asked, I'm actually going to read it exactly because it's interesting. Just stirring the pot here, which I love.
See, there you go. Just stirring the pot. Okay.
But he really wasn't. I don't think this is stirring the pot. This is a good question. Wants the opinions of everyone on whether pro status fishing anglers should be in the BFLs. Isn't the purpose of the BFL tournament for a weekend angler who likes to compete but hasn't been able to compete at a higher level? So essentially they want to know, should pros be allowed to fish in the BFLs, or what about like the big bass bash type ones? You know what I mean?
No, that's a good question. All I can do is go off of my experiences. I remember when I was a young angler and, I looked up to the guys. The guys of the Midwest were the Hibdons, Guido and Dion Hibdon, Denny and Chad Brower, the guys down at Table Rock, Charlie Campbell, Mark Davis, all that. So I fished a lot of regional tournaments then. I got to say, I was in awe when these guys showed up at a tournament. And all I could tell you is my competition level went up, it seems like several levels, when I knew I was competing against Denny Brower or Guido Hibdon or Mark Davis. And I wanted to see where my skill set would fare against these guys. These guys are the pros, absolutely. But the thing you got to remember is, even though, I fished against Denny Brower at Truman or Lake of the Ozarks or against Charlie Campbell on Table Rock or Mark Davis down at Grand Lake, these guys were the best of the best, and they still are, but these guys don't get to fish a lot on these lakes. I mean, I grew up fishing in the Midwest. I feel like I could hold my own still to this day, but back in the day, I fished these lakes all the time. I mean, I fished 3 or 4 lakes around the Kansas City area that I had time for, and that's what I fished. So I became really good at those lakes where, the big pros would show up, and Denny Brower obviously grew up fishing Lake of the Ozarks, but there was a period there where the only time he would fish that lake would be during one of these tournaments that he signed up for. So I loved it. I wanted to see where I could compete against this. I think where I see the negative side, where most people feel like they can't beat the pros, they're there to win as much money as they can and beat the other locals. So they don't want other pros being in there to compete against it. Me as a aspiring, wanted to be pro angler, I wanted to see how I could fare against these guys at a regional level event to know, because I'm hoping to compete against these guys in a few years at the top level. So if I can't beat them here, then I definitely don't have any business trying to beat them up there, because here all I had to do was beat one or two of them. When you make it to the big leagues, you have to beat 100 guys at that same level. So I loved it. I loved it when the pros would show up. Me personally, I can attest. One of the last Kansas Federation tournaments I fished, I thought, hey, I was still involved with the clubs, and I saw it as a backdoor way for me to potentially make it to a Bassmaster Classic. I'm like, I still belong to the Kansas clubs. I'm like, I'm going to go compete at the Federation level and make it to the Classic that way. So I went out to one of the Kansas lakes, showed up there, and felt pretty good at my chances of making the state team. Lo and behold, I went out there and got humbled very badly. I think, if I remember right, I blanked the first day, or maybe caught one, and I did terrible. I was very humbled at that thing. I think there was probably a lot of guys that were upset that I showed up there, but I assure you, after I left there with my tail between my legs, there was probably some guys that, especially that did way better than me, that probably felt a lot better after the fact. So I think personally, it's the people that are mad if a pro shows up there. It's an ego thing for them personally. But like I said, if they end up beating them after the fact, it's a great thing for them. So me, like I said, on the other side, I love it when pros would show up to regular events.
Okay.
Did that answer the question?
Kind of, but there was like 100 replies on this, so I'm going to read some of them because that tied into them good. So some people were like, "Hey, it's not really an advantage. They're the ones at the disadvantage because they're on the road all the time. So you're not there, so you don't get to practice."
I touched on that. The disadvantages,
and you're fishing. The people there are usually fishing on their home pond, so they should have a lot more extensive knowledge of it at the time. So I think that's pretty. Yeah, you guys are, like, if somebody asked you about Truman Lake, it's only an hour and a half from here, but when's the last time you fished Truman Lake?
Yeah, I used to know Truman like the back of my hand, but I even do that. I'll have people call and ask about trying to get they're doing their own homework for some particular tournaments, and they'll call and ask me about some knowledge that I used to know these lakes very well. And I tell them right up front, I'm like, look, any information I'm telling you about Grand Lake or Truman, it's 20 years old. I can give you ideas of what to fish or how to fish, but to know the stuff that's really dialed in anymore, I just can't do it. We don't have the time.
Okay, I'm just going to read off some of these other comments because that ties in there too, like you were saying. And a lot of people are like, hey, I'm a boater and I love it when they show up. I want to beat the best. So that like Ric Flair once said, you got to, you have to, be the man, you have to beat the man. It's fun when you get to beat him. It's not always easy, but man, it feels great when you can beat them. So a lot of people, it's the same thing. They want to know and they want to fish so they can beat. So I think that's good.
So, hey, I didn't touch on the Big Bass Bash one that you mentioned.
Well, and let me ask you that, because somebody on here, which I thought was kind of mean, but that's okay. People are just...
Well, while you're looking for that, I want to say, like, the big bass tournaments where it's a single fish, I think the organizations miss out.
Isn't that luck?
If they were to bring pros in, they could use them as a marketing tool. Yeah. But also, anybody, if you have much bass fishing experience at all, you kind of know that a single big bass is a luck deal. It's to a degree. Obviously, the more knowledge you have, the luckier you're going to be. But to me, I would love to fish one. I've never got to fish one. They look like they're a blast, but I can't even fish one, which is kind of frustrating to know that I can't fish Lake of the Ozarks in a Big Bass Bash. However, the guy that fishes there every single weekend can participate in that event. And on that note, maybe they need to have a different categories, because I'd love to come and be a part of those type of events. But anybody that's ever fished a Big Bass Bash, usually the person that wins it, which is neat to see and awesome, is maybe some kid that just, the grandpa tied on a lure for him, or maybe somebody's wife that just, has her favorite technique that, catches the biggest bass of the tournament on a shaky head when all the big, guys up front are throwing big glide baits and all that, and somebody's wife wins it on a shaky head. So, I wish I could fish them because they look like they're a lot of fun. There's prizes involved, but, I think if people don't want somebody fishing those, they're really missing out just on the opportunity of having pros participate.
Okay. So These are kind of negative ones, but that's all right, because some of these people put things like, and I'm going to read a couple before you jump in. Fishing down is low class. I don't like that, because are you saying the other anglers aren't good? I think that's degrading to the other anglers when you say that if you're fishing down, that's low class to do.
Fishing down is low class. But so even on that note, here's another way of looking at that is we live right here by the Kansas Speedway. Last week, we just had a big NASCAR race. All the big NASCAR pros were in town out here on the track and they're racing. Well, on Friday nights beforehand, the way I understand, they're up at the dirt track racing with all the locals and all that. I don't know anything about racing, but I can assure you, I guarantee you, the local dirt track guys probably love it when those guys show up to be a part of it. And I mean, that's for me, sometimes that's the only way I can fish a Truman Lake, a Lake of the Ozarks, or compete on them anymore. And why should I be handicapped and not get to compete at some of my local lakes anymore just because I'm a professional angler?
Because you just love to fish.
Yeah, because I mean, I love to fish. I love to compete and
hang out with other fishermen.
And yeah, socialize with other fishermen. I mean, I don't hardly even get to see or fish against a lot of the guys I grew up fishing anymore because one, I don't have the time, or two, per rules, I can't even fish the tournament. So I think that's just kind of a bad deal when people say that. And you know, like I said, I look forward to fishing any of them, you know?
Yeah. So we'll kind of get close to wrapping this up. But yeah, some people are saying I believe it should be for only people that are working a 40-hour week. And if you are making money doing it, you should be ineligible. Or something, this is a blue-collar circuit, and these lower circuits are there for a reason. You have no business for the pros to be there. These people are like, there's so many levels of pro. What do you consider pro? And what is a pro fisherman these days anyway?
Hold on. Yeah. So that's a funny question. That's something we should talk about a different day is for levels of pros. Well, what amazes me, and this is what's probably the hardest thing about our sport in general, is the classifications of a pro. Because it's funny, to me, the classifications of an actual professional angler are as if you make your income solely on competing in tournaments and relying on sponsors and the world of what that entails. Not that you have a 40-hour a week and maybe have a few sponsors and then call yourself a pro. So I don't know. It goes back to, like I said at the beginning of this video, these are all opinions.
Yeah.
We're not all going to agree. My opinion is going to be different than yours, but this is just my opinion. And ultimately, going into any competition, if you're following the rules, that's the most important part. And
because it's you against the fish in the lake.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's it's you against the fish, and if that was the thing that always, for me, like I said, it pushed me that much harder to want to succeed and beat the best. I mean, heck, and let's put it this way. So at Lake of the Ozarks, I'm just using that example because it's right down the road. Do you want to compete against me at Lake of the Ozarks? Or do you want to compete against the guides that fish there 300 days a year and that have 150 brush piles marked and, that have this networking unit of 10 different guides that all kind of work together? Which one do you really want to compete against there, I guess, would be the ultimate question. And I guess if you don't want to compete at a level where you're competing against guys that might more than likely beat you, a club is probably a better level, to where a club is somewhere where you have some more input. Clubs, you can kind of intact your own rules and set it at a different level. Heck, you can just get you and your buddies out there, get you a nice Bubba scale and the MLF app and do your own little mini tournaments and make it as special as you want, and you can call yourself a winner because you beat your two buddies and you won the tournament. So yeah, I don't know. They're all opinions, and we love to hear them. And good or bad, but keep the bad ones polite.
Yeah.
You can have an opinion, but be polite.
But
you don't have
hateful.
to be mean or hateful about it.
It's funny, and then I'm going to wrap this up because you had mentioned that. Yes,
because I have to fly.
Yes,
I have a long flight.
He's headed to China. So it says, how is this any different than Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, or Dale Jr. showing up at their old local tracks on a Saturday night and burning the rubber with the other roots? This is the best. This is where they remember their roots. Yep. And I think that's you. You just love those. I mean, we grew up fishing Central Pro-Am and Shawnee Mission. So all those local things.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up fishing a local bass club. I'd love to go fish with the old Shawnee Mission Bassmasters today, or or back in the day it was the Red Man tournaments. Now the BFLs, those are still around, and I did some of those a few years back and had a blast. Then Central Pro-Am. We don't have Central Pro-Am here in the Midwest anymore. I know there's some buddy circuits and some of the more the Toyota series and all that. I mean, that's me. I mean, I have my buddies too. I'd still love to fish locally. So I think just because I show up, I shouldn't be frowned upon because I show up to fish at a tournament. I think you should be excited that pros want to come and fish with you at those events.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to wrap this one up, but we are going to be doing a lot more of things that I have seen posted.
We're going to be doing a lot of these in the future.
So send in your questions.
Hopefully you'll enjoy. So if you guys have topics or ideas or tips or anything, please incorporate them. But in the meantime, I'm headed all the way across the world to China to go fish an MLF event and hang out with some fellow fishermen over there. Stop in Japan on my way home and see my son Mason, and then we'll be back in front of the camera again soon. So thanks for tuning in.